Hello, my name is Grant Pierce, and I am a 28-year oil and gas consultant at this point. I grew up in Louisiana, in the United States, and where I grew up, basically you had two choices of work to do. You either were a farmer or you worked in oil and gas. Uh, Finished high school there in Shreveport, where I grew up. Have one younger brother, mother and father still alive. My mother worked for a geologist for most of her life, and funny enough, her father was a geologist as well that had traveled the world, mainly South America, when he was still alive and in good health. Anyway, so I finished high school in the early '90s, '93. The summer before I finished high school, a few of my friends had already started working for a local cased hole electric wireline company, who I also started working with after school, summertime, holidays, etc. I did go to university for 2 years, and during those 2 years, I also continued to work uh, in between classes, holidays, breaks, etc., for that same cased hole wireline, electric wireline company. I spent between from 93 to say 97 between Louisiana and Arkansas, working for that wireline company. And I'd got to a point where I wanted to move back home. So I moved into the fracturing business, working for BJ Services Company. And we were a district, Bossier City, that had a very high turnover rate. So if you showed the interest, and if you put in the work, you moved up very quickly. So I very quickly moved from just a equipment operator to a senior equipment operator to running the downhole blender, acid transport, acid transfer pumps, etc. After working for those guys for a year and being on some very large jobs, from 10 barrels per minute pumping up to 150 barrels per minute pumping. So a location with maybe 10 pieces of large heavy machinery on it up to 50 pieces of large heavy machinery on it with the ground shaking under us. Quite a time. Got to a point where I felt like if I needed to grow, I wanted to grow, I needed to go work offshore. So me and myself and one of my friends there, we went down to South Louisiana, got on with Halliburton. Uh, Actually, at that point, they wanted to start doing modular skid fracks. So since we both came from a large scale fracturing background, we basically spearheaded their operations on modular frac packs. That was when I was 22, 23. Also, about those around those same years, we had a downturn. That would have been in '97. In 1997, I went to work for Core Lab Protechnics, and what we did was we metered or pumped radioactive sand into frac jobs, cement jobs, different types of jobs where we needed to evaluate if there were leaks, completion evaluation, etc. With Protechnics, I also moved into their logging tools, where we basically evaluated frac pack and gravel pack how well gravel packs and frac packs were doing. Basically, an evaluation tool. So I stayed for those guys for around 7 years, and that would have been 10 years into oil and gas. Decided I needed a bit of a break from oil and gas. I was still quite young, right? So I took about 6 months off, just running heavy machinery and running a friend of mine's, managing a friend of mine's car lot. After working in the sales business, or the car sales business anyway, I decided that was not for me, and I got back into the oil field quite quickly. From there, I went to downhole video cameras, back into a pumping services company where I learned about cementing. And in 2005, I went to work for WellTech, which is a horizontal well intervention technology, downhole tractors, uh, any sort of tools that coiled tubing has, they have to be able to do on electric wire line. Basically, it's exactly what it sounds like, a tractor. It has wheels come out and it pulls whatever electric line tool string it needs to pull down into the well. With those guys, I worked all over the world. I should say, or I'll just back up a minute. In those 7 years with ProTechnics, predominantly deep water work, though of course we started off doing shallow work, but then I moved on to the larger Shell contracts and the BP contracts, and was requested as one of the guys out there because I was known as somebody who got my business done and who was technically minded enough to troubleshoot when I had problems. And of course, as any uh, oil and gas service, you're going to have problems at some point in your lives, and I had my fair share. I learned a lot. So back to WellTech. I was hired at WellTech in 2005 to open up a workshop in New Orleans as the base manager. That was also the same year that Katrina came through and wiped New Orleans off the map. Luckily, our workshop, it was already framed up, and it was on high ground, so it didn't get much damage. So I opened that workshop up, and then in December of that same year, I was offered an opportunity to go work in Angola, to be based in Luanda on a rotation. So I jumped at it. Spent 2 years working in and out of Luanda, Malongo, Cabinda, Soyo, etc. Mainly for Total, but some work for Exxon as well on the Kazombe and B. Dahlia, Girasol, Rosa for Total. After 2 years in Luanda, my contract came to an end. It was pretty normal to do 2-year contracts for WellTech. And I opted, we had so much other new business development going on. I opted to take a position opening a base, building and opening a base in India. So from Angola, I left there a few days before Christmas, and they had asked me if I would stop in Vietnam and perform a job on my way home. And I thought, yeah, I'll never have this chance again. So I did. I ended up spending 3 months there and basically have never left. Me and my girlfriend at the time, now my wife, we did live in Penang for 1 year while I worked in India on my India contract, but we ended up going back to Vietnam. So after 3 months in Vietnam, my India contract started up, and I spent 2 years there working for Reliance. Built out the workshop, got it opened up, got everything operational. Uh, did a fairly large deep water subsea contract for Reliance Industries Limited. Our contract ended there. I went to Equatorial Guinea for about 6 months and finished up a Hess contract. From there to Yuzhno-Sakhalinsk, Russia, Sakhalin Island. People probably know it more as that. Uh, Basically went there and we worked out of Weatherford's workshop for about 6 months. And of course, we had always planned, we were working for Shell there, or SEIC, Shell operated. And we had always, the intention was to open our own base there. So I was instrumental in opening up a base in Sakhalin, or at least a temporary base. Um, so experienced the super cold Arctic. I remember leaving home one December from Vietnam, and it was 35, and landing in Sakhalin, and it was minus 20. So you can imagine the temperature extremes and how that affects the body. Uh, Close to 2 years in Sakhalin, I was offered a position back in Vietnam, actually based in Vietnam, as region technical manager to cover Asia Pacific, which was Malaysia, Indonesia, India, Australia, New Zealand, Vietnam, Brunei, Thailand, China. Uh, did that job for about 3 years. And at that point, I had decided I've been considering going out on my own for a very long time during those years. So I decided it was time for me to go out on my own. I'd been working for a company for long enough. That was 2014, mid 2014 actually. In December of 2014, I went to work as a consultant for FTO Services, and I basically built out a light well intervention vessel with the help of FMC, Edison Swiss, Halliburton, who else? Sea Innovation had the ROVs, etc. So we basically took control of a light well intervention vessel that does subsea well intervention, and made the modifications that needed to be made on it, put a tower on, got the vessel ready for operations. Spent almost a year there, and that would have been crash time 2015. The project was taking too long to come to inception. So as I was a contractor, or a few of us were contractors, we were released. The company ended up folding not long after that and selling the asset to FMC. So from there, I was offered a position with Halliburton as basically a floating well intervention advisor consultant. Did a little bit of work for them, ad hoc jobs here and there over the next year and a half. Did some ad hoc work in the Gulf of Mexico with coiled tubing, with a miniature specialized coiled tubing, and where we cleaned out a pipeline. 2017, I was offered a job with ePlug, Danish company, Norwegian company, for a contract in Qatar. So I went there as one of the operations leads, as one of the country operations leads, got their business set up there, and we ran operations as well on some of the most prolific gas-bearing wells in the world. Also high H2S content. So, and being in a desert location that gets up into the mid 50s during the day, not such a nice location. 2 years I spent on that contract. And at the end of 2019, I was offered a chance to go get back into subsea work, light well intervention, and I jumped at it because that is really where my passion lies these days. So I turned in. I was told that I would be going to UK in 1 week's time, so I turned in my resignation with ePlug, and then the project pushed for a year. So I had to reinvent myself, turn myself into a business development manager. Started putting business cases together for bringing niche services and companies into Vietnam, offering that vehicle, and putting myself out there on LinkedIn consistently, offering my value, meeting people from all walks of the world, and motivational speakers and prominent performance coaches who people around the world know. It's just a funny way that all worked. Beginning of 2020, I was offered a job with Shell Nigeria to go take on a light well intervention subsea campaign there as one of their well site supervisors. I brought one of my colleagues and good friends on who also is based in Vung Tau, Vietnam, where we both live. Both with wives and 2 children there. Um, and that was right in the middle of COVID. Uh, we spent maybe close to 2 weeks in Nigeria before we were evacuated. Work was suspended, contracts canceled, and we got to spend 3.5 months in Turkey due to airspace closures and the fact that our agent didn't take out health insurance on us and we didn't have COVID tests prior, basically because it was just a rushed evacuation. So we got stuck in Turkey for 3.5 months. Uh, Cambodia ended up opening their borders up after 3.5 months. So we applied for Cambodian visas since we could get next door to home with the intention of being able to cross the border, which, by the way, never happened. So we got ourselves a COVID test, got flights booked to Cambodia, and got into Cambodia in late June, where we stayed for 5 months. My colleague is still there today, but he's coming into Vietnam next week. So I'm now in Vietnam in quarantine, but that's kind of a summary of my oil and gas life. Why have I stayed in oil and gas for this long? There must be something that I see that keeps me here. Well, here's the way I look at it. Everything we use today is based on petroleum products. And though there is a shift to cleaner sources, petroleum is still going to be required even for those cleaner sources. I don't see oil and gas going away in our lifetimes. I would even say early into my children's, who are now 8 and 11, lifetimes. I enjoy working in chaotic places. I enjoy meeting other cultures. Yeah, I enjoy. Well, okay, I don't so much enjoy the traveling now after the last 9 months, but I honestly do enjoy the traveling. I enjoy seeing how people do things in other places, and it's really been an eye opener for me. Coming from the U.S., everybody is sort of looking down that looking down that tunnel, because there you don't even need a passport. So going to Angola, Nigeria, Equatorial Guinea, Sakhalin, everywhere in Asia, uh, yeah, Norway, Denmark, lots of places in Europe. It has just been a complete eye opener, and I wouldn't trade it for anything in the world. It's shaped me and made me who I am. What else? Uh, I'm a guy who can work in a team very well, and I'm also a guy who can work alone very well. I don't need somebody to give me instructions more than once. Uh, yeah, I don't know. I don't know anything else. I think that pretty much covers it. Get back to me if you have any questions. That's me, Grant Pierce, 46 years old, American expat, lived in Vietnam for the last 15 years. My wife is Vietnamese, and our two daughters are both Vietnamese American, 8 and 11 years old. And that's where my passion lies. Everything I do for my kids. Anyway, that's me.